So you know how you walk into a building
Uh-huh.
and then they ask for your information, your ID. Actually, sometimes they ask you to leave your ID.
Yes, and
your name, your phone number. Like, you give a lot of your data.
I think your fingerprints, that is something that can literally identify you to the T. That is very, very sensitive data. That's why we have rules and regulations when handling health data. You don't take more data than you need, and also you have to protect it and safeguard it to a higher standard. Data protection is safeguarding of your information that you give it out to data controllers or processors. Yes, which brings us to more technical terms. You hear data subject, data processors.
You said data what?
Data controller, data processor.
All right, let's break it down. All right.
Welcome to yet another episode of Just Legal, a podcast by MNO Advocates LLP. I'll be your host, Liz Nderito. With me today, I'm joined by some brilliant minds. We have...
My name is George Karumbi. I'm a cybersecurity expert.
Taria Homa, an advocate of the High Court, working at MNO Advocates LLP as a commercial TMT associate advocate.
So today we are going to have a really interesting conversation. I'm really excited about that. We want to talk about data, and I'm going to start to bring it home. I'm going to start by giving a scenario. So you know how you walk into a building and then they ask for your information, your ID. Actually, sometimes they ask you to leave your ID.
Yes, and
your name, your phone number. Like, you give a lot of your data.
Yeah.
Has any one of you experienced that?
All the time.
How does it make you feel? Because I hate it.
I don't like it because I feel like I don't know what happens to that data after I leave it there. And I feel like a lot of this data is sometimes shared with a lot of these unsolicited messages and marketing messages that you get. And I feel violated in a way because I didn't give... The purpose was security, right? To make sure they can track who's getting in and out of that building. But it was not to have my data being shared with a third-party marketing company or whatever that is, sending me marketing messages, later.
Also, for you assume your data is actually shared out.
I know for sure. I know for sure, yeah. Yeah, so that's how I feel about it. I don't know how about you, Talia.
It's the same thing. Yeah. The lack of consent. You're just being told, put your ID number. They don't even know if it's a fake ID number, it's a fake phone number. Personally, sometimes I put a fake phone number because you all know how things go. In Kenya, you find someone has registered your number with your ID, then things just go the way they usually go. So for me, it feels very violated. Like, my right to privacy is actually infringed as a matter of fact. Yes, the lack of consent.
Yeah, and I think, I've realized a lot of our data, we give out a lot of our data. And maybe we could tell our viewers what data is. When we say data, when we use the word data, what do we mean by that?
Data is any information that has been changed into a format that can be processed. As it is right now, everyone in this room knows my name is Taria, but my name and my ID number hasn't been processed in a way that it identifies me. So that is what data is. Data is information that has been processed and transformed in a format that can identify a person.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, of course, now when we get into data, we have personal data, we have sensitive data.
Yes. So personal data is basically just data about you, your name, your ID, your email address, where you live. But sensitive data is the intricacies, very, very, I'm looking for another word to use, but it's very sensitive. I don't use the same word. It's data that is personalized, like your health data, your...
Okay.
Yes, anything, your fingerprints, that is something that can literally identify you to the T. That is very, very sensitive data. That's why we have rules and regulations when handling health data. You don't take more data than you need, and also you have to protect it and safeguard it to a higher standard.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Of course, in my mind, I'm thinking how that's a whole conversation. I think another episode, maybe.
Yeah.
Because
sure.
I'm thinking personal. I can argue my personal data is also sensitive. I don't know what you think, but conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think That's understood. You have something to add, George?
No, I was just wondering, like, from a very legal standpoint, what does the law say about how my personal data is used, and what are the kind of the provisions that are out there if I feel like my own right to privacy has been, violated. But probably, I can pursue if I ever feel like that.
Which now gets us into the conversation. Our episode really is on data protection.
Yeah, it is.
So maybe you could just break it down to our viewers what data protection is.
Yes. So data protection is safeguarding of your information that you give it out to data controllers or processors. Yes, which brings us to more technical terms. You hear data subject, data processors.
You said data what?
Data controller, data processor.
All right, let's break it down. All right.
So a data controller is a person or an entity that is processing your data, that is collecting your data. For example, a gaming company. In that case, the gaming company is a data controller because you sign up on their site, you give them your phone number and probably your name. In that case, for the betting situation, a data processor is now cloud computing, where this betting company stores their data probably in another country. George, our cybersecurity expert, knows about cloud computing and AWS. I just know it.
Jargon.
Yes. But in this scenario, the processor is under contract with the controller to process the data. I don't know if I'm making sense.
So in such a scenario, I register myself with a gaming company based in Kenya. But their data is hosted in a server based in Germany. Do they still are there any responsibilities they have still over my data, given that now my data is located in another country, and which laws, probably apply in such a scenario? And say the server in Germany has been hacked, and my data now is out there. What happens?
And that actually happens.
It happens.
Yeah, it happens
hacks are happening
all the time.
Every day nowadays. And cloud computing is a fact of life now. It's here with us, and it's a scenario that can actually happen.
Maybe you could tell us what cloud computing is, so that guys don't get lost. Because I'm already feeling like I'm lost. I'm still at data controllers and data processors.
The clouds.
Cloud computing is
literally
basically basically a scenario where you outsource your storage, computing and networking services to a cloud provider that has a data center probably located somewhere else, not your country, in the same country you're in, and that data center can actually be shared by other multiple companies that are actually using the same services.
So now data protection comes in where we are trying to protect this data that the data controllers and the processors have.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
So in this scenario for cloud computing, data protection comes in when the third party company in Germany is being told by a betting company, we are using your services, probably your systems. Once people sign up, the data goes directly to you. So all you need to give us is how many subscribers do you have, how many people are betting on this game, what are the odds. They are not collecting the data directly. That's now the relationship between a controller and a processor. So the controller and processor, they have a contract. So this is actually where MNO comes in, your lawyers come in to make sure that the contract that you have with the controller and the processor is very, very compliant with the laws, because you have to comply with the Kenyan data protection laws and the Germany or the EU GDPR, which is a general data protection guideline.
Okay.
So the contract that we draft for you between a controller and a processor, it really outlines that this is your obligation as a processor. You're not supposed to use this information or give it out to third parties. And if you do this, you're breaching the contract, and you'll be liable to fines and other things. But that's where we plug in ourselves to make sure that this data that is being collected from the data subject is not being misused. It's very accurate. It's transparent in a way that if someone who's betting says, you know what, I'm done betting. Tomorrow, delete my data. I don't want to do this. I've eaten school fees and everything. And they say delete it. That contract says, you go tell the processor, please delete this person's data. And if you're storing it, it's only for a legal purpose, and you have to inform the data subject about the purpose.
Okay, so you mentioned two things, a data processor and a data controller. Can we say, in this case, who's the intermediary who's collecting data on behalf of the final user? And who's the final user in this case?
The final user is always the controller, because they're the ones who determine the purpose for collecting the data.
All right.
But also the processor is the intermediary if they're being contracted.
Okay.
They won't be an intermediary if the controller doesn't contract them to collect the data. So in this case, their work is just to collect. They don't know the use. They don't determine how it's going to be stored. They don't determine what information they're getting from it. So basically the intermediary. But they can only be an intermediary if they're contracted. So it's actually a contract. They're not supposed to do it out of probably like statutory obligations. They only collect data on contractual obligations.
All right. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But a data controller is collecting data on a statutory obligation to provide you with a service.
What's a statutory obligation?
A statutory obligation can be very different. If, for example, the way we use our government services to process our DL and our passports, in that case, that's a statutory use because we need.
And KYC, can we call that a statutory obligation?
Yes, it actually is, according to the anti-money laundering and terrorism financing regulations. So you have to know your customer. So that's actually now a statutory obligation. So obligations where the state is compelling you to do them. Right. The state is telling you need to register as a data controller because this is the information you're collecting from our citizens. Yes.
Okay, that actually makes sense in so many ways. Yeah.
So other examples?
Other examples include schools. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I just realized right now to register for your NEC exams, primary, okay, they're all NEC, the KCP, your child actually needs to have a birth certificate. That didn't happen
I know.
times. I feel ancient, but yeah.
Yes, because in this case, when you actually think about it, a government institution is collecting information from minors, but who's giving the consent? It's the parents. Because they can't go directly to the child and ask them, should we pick information? They're telling the parents that you need to bring in the birth certificate. I think also the parents' IDs, but I'm not so sure.
I'm not sure.
Yes, because
I just remember thinking that's so weird.
Because there's an account that's being created for.
I don't know. The first time I handled my birth certificate was when I was taking my ID. Yeah,
because I know there's an account that NEC creates for you. You can't.
Yeah, like from I don't know what age.
Oh really?
Yeah, since they introduced CBC, once you give us your birth certificate, that's the same account you'll use for KCC registration.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so that actually brings in the whole aspect of how you're collecting information from minors. If it's a minor, the guardian definitely has to consent to it. If there's no consent to collection of that information, you're infringing on their right to privacy.
Oh wow.
Yes.
I think this conversation really does affect and concern many people, if you ask me, because at least each of us, will use hotels, our banks,
internet service providers.
Oh yeah.
Yes, when your internet service provider is down and you go on Twitter, you're like, please refresh account number, this. And then what happens? You find we have these fake accounts coming and telling you, just give us your phone number. The next thing you know, your M-Pesa has been wiped. That means that internet service provider has not put appropriate safeguards and can actually go and report them to ODPC, because how am I tweeting you and telling you refresh my internet, and the next thing I'm seeing bots coming and tagging me and telling me, send me your number. The next thing my money is cleared and everything else.
Yeah. Talk about that. What recourse do I have as a data subject, right? if I feel like my data privacy has been violated? What steps, is there a complaint that I can lodge, and where do I lodge it at?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
Because I know most of us, we're not so sure about what to do. We usually we complain on Twitter, and as much as we want social justice to prevail, we have institutions that actually take it up, which is the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner.
Okay. So what you call the ODPC?
The ODPC. The term is too long, so it's very easy to say ODPC. Their offices are in Westlands. So what you do, you can go to their site, you lodge a complaint via email, or you can call them. If you call them, they take it down. They take down your complaint and make sure that it's escalated, and then they will get back to you in around 2 weeks or 14 working days. Exactly. Okay. Yes.
So why do we actually need legal advisory?
We need legal advisory on data protection because you're right, this is a fundamental right as per the Constitution. We have a right to privacy. And that privacy is only upholded or safeguarded through legal protection. That's why we have the laws. So where we come in is we make sure that once data is collected, do you have the appropriate information? Have you been told, have you been given all the information that this is how this data is being collected? It's for this use. It's transparent, that you can come to us as a data controller and tell us to delete the data.
I have a burning question. Right?
Yeah.
So I have this brilliant idea.
George, the burning question.
I have this brilliant idea
of
this social media app that is going to, it's the Facebook killer. That's what I'm calling it. It's the Instagram killer. It's going to decapitate all these social media apps. But I'm going to consume a lot of people's personal information. Right? I need your advice. How do you come in, and how can you better help me to, one, protect myself legally as a business owner, and also to ensure that I am in compliance with the laws of this country.
True.
Yes.
So in this case, can I call you a startup?
Yes. I'm a startup founder. You can call me a startup
founder.
Yes.
Our new LinkedIn profile, everyone is a startup founder.
Yes.
But the good thing with seeking legal advice, we usually say compliance is an ongoing matter. Yes, we usually try and mitigate the risk instead of defending. You mitigate before defense. So how we come in, we give you the advice on how you're collecting your customers' data. When they sign up on your app or your website, are they given terms and conditions telling them that this is the data we are collecting and this is how we are collecting it, and for how long are we going to store the data, so that you can avoid situations where you go and copy and paste from
which I'm very, very tempted to do.
You go and copy and paste from definitely one of these big tech companies. The only thing you're copying and pasting is probably the privacy policy. There are other policies that are concerned into it. If it's a financial app, does your policy capture the anti-money laundering rules? Does your policy capture the Data Protection Act? Does your policy capture the credit regulations in Kenya? Every single thing. So we have situations where, I'm a startup, then I see a privacy policy, I go copy it as it is. But you forget that you also need a cookie for your website. You forget that you also need to get your customers or your consumers or your users to sign a responsible disclosure agreement. You forget that you need to tell your customers and your users in case there's a breach. This is our incident breach policy, our procedure, that in case a breach occurs, once you're aware, we'll notify you within 72 hours. In case our processor in another country, like in Germany, notifies there's a breach, they need to notify you in probably 48 hours. That's how...
48 hours?
Yes.
My God.
Are those the actual set timelines? Like if
now in
my
Kenya,
startup is hacked, I need to inform my users that their accounts have been compromised within 72 hours, you said?
Yes, in Kenya it's 72 hours.
72 hours or 48 hours?
72 hours. 48 hours is giving an example.
72 hours is 3 years, guys. So people have already
But
No, I mean, like,
yeah.
it's a long time.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's
Feels
arguable.
like ages.
Yeah.
It feels like ages, but you need time to prepare.
Because
There's a lot that's
the 72
happening
I'm speaking
in
as
the
a person
background
who's
as a cybersecurity
the
Information.
data
expert.
subject.
There's a lot that is happening in the background to remediate and to stop.
So you're
you know,
speaking as a cybersecurity expert.
Yes,
Me, I'm
so-
speaking as a data subject. Like, my information is just
Yeah.
out there. I
Yeah.
don't even know doing what.
But the 72 hours is also to give the data controller time to rectify that the breach.
It's a long time.
Because I can't.
Why not tell me before so that I know?
And then also
So that in
see-
case
yeah,
I
so
am
to-
getting weird and like my money is yeah.
But that's now how George comes in as a cybersecurity expert. When they collect information, a data controller is collecting information and they're storing it, they can encrypt that information. So whatever happens, a breach might occur and then your data is leaked, but your data is encrypted, which means that the way George had mentioned earlier during our break, that a telecommunications company had put up these regulations for once someone pays via mobile money, they don't put the whole number. They only provide a data controller with the last 3 digits.
So Taria, maybe you could tell us, why do data processors and data controllers actually need legal advisory?
For mostly compliance with data protection laws, compliance with the Constitution with regards to right to privacy.
It's a requirement.
It's a requirement.
Okay.
Yes. Compliance with also international data protection regulations, because in certain situations you find yourself as a data controller transferring the data to another country, and that country has its own data protection regulations. As a controller and a processor, you actually are not in a position to probably know about these regulations. But as your lawyers, we are here for you to explain to you how these regulations affect your business and affect that the data that you're collecting and the data that you're transferring to this company in this other country. We also come in and tell you that since you're processing this sensitive data, which is probably like health, you having a health app, we tell you that we actually need a data audit and a data impact assessment. That's how we come in. And also, to top it all, definitely for registration with the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, where we take you through the whole process. We draft for you the required documents and we advise you on compliance and regulation as a data controller, because you can be a data controller and a processor in the data protection industry, but you also find yourself, you're also in the financial industry, which means you're regulated financially as well. So you find yourself, you have to register as a digital credit lender, because you're giving digital credit, you're giving out loans via the mobile money or via bank. So it's intertwined. That's a good thing about data protection. It's not only data protection alone. It can be you're a venture capitalist and you're funding startups. We have new crowdfunding regulations. You'll also need to get more information on how to register as a VC, to register also as a data controller and a processor, and also to just have the clear line of, are you under contract with someone, with another company to process this data? We're giving you the whole information, compliance, and just covering your back from every single side. Yes.
So I think the way George asked if he starts a startup, the Instagram killer. So you
Instagram
get why
killer.
you need.
The Facebook killer, yes.
Facebook killer.
What is it, Facebook or Instagram? Guys.
I'm about to take the whole social media space.
Oh God.
With my
Well.
I'm calling it Tujuane.
Oh my. There's actually, that feels like.
Let me ask. In Europe, they have GDPR,
Yes.
right?
What's that?
The General Data Protection Regulations.
Right.
Okay, general.
Do you interact with that, or does a local startup get affected by that, or by those rules, or by that act that's in Europe and they're based in Kenya? And how do those two interact?
The only way they interact is that our Data Protection Act has actually been aided by the GDPR, because our lawmakers, at least we had the idea for the GDPR, so it helped us come up with the data protection regulations. So as a startup in Kenya, your only concern or your only compliance obligation really is the Data Protection Act.
Right.
The only time that the GDPR applies to you is if you're transferring the data that you have to a third party company situated there.
Right.
So now that's why your lawyers come in and tell you, as per our regulations, you need to make sure where the data is going, it's also being safeguarded according to the appropriate safeguards. Are they also fulfilling the obligations in that country? Are they also registered as a data controller or a processor in that country? Do they also have, is their cybersecurity system also up to date? What happens when the information is breached? Are you making sure that they're not transferring this information to third parties? So in that case, that's when you get to interact with that, and that's only to a contractual level, because you're only contracting the processor, the contractual obligations I talked about initially.
Yeah, because I was actually going to ask, does that mean when the data leaves here and goes to probably to Europe, now it stops being governed by the laws of this country and it originated from here?
No.
But,
it's a very good question, because you find some countries in Africa, they have very stringent cross-border data transfers, mostly probably regional. So probably data is coming from EAC, from East Africa. It's going to ECOWAS or it's going to SADC now in South Africa. South Africa has their own regional framework. They say the only way data will come to South Africa, or the only way data will leave South Africa, is if that region also has a Data Protection Act. Do they have regulations on data being transferred? Do they also have regulations on how to protect sensitive data? Will they use this information probably for canvassing for political party? There are very many regulations. Once you collect data, you process it and you retain it, you have to think about where this data is going, how this data is going to affect the data subject. Because once it's identifiable to someone, that's it.
The data subject is the owner of the data.
Yes.
I have another question, right? So in 2017, The Economist declares data is the new oil.
Yes.
Right? We all know the data is very, very valuable, and it's going to be very valuable going along.
It is.
So what are some of the legal trends that you see or you foresee are going to come up as a lawyer or as a legal expert that you can probably speak about and speak of, that people need to be, one, aware of, and need to start thinking about as soon as now?
Currently, the trend is data protection, how we can protect this data. But we also need people to look into how are we conducting data audits for our companies, because probably you have a data protection officer in your company and they take you through how, is this data protected and this data stored well. The trend is going to be frequent data audits. Governments are going to be saying every company and every institution is collecting data. Are they auditing? It's going to be more or less like KRA. You're filing probably like an audit report.
Yes.
Every year. Exactly. And that's how
it actually makes sense.
Yeah, and that's how the lawyers come in as MNO advocates. That's how we come in. We have our data protection officers there to give you data audits, there to conduct data impact assessments, and to take you through the data protection laws and make sure that with every year, because every year you collect new data. This year you'll collect data probably on Kenyans aged 18 to 30. At another point, you'll collect data on probably health data to help your business. So at every point, that's now the trend that's we're going to see it.
Okay.
Some mandatory compliance, more or less. I see it coming up.
Okay.
So are there any deadlines the ODPC has for registration?
Not really. Initially, the registration was starting from 14th September. It's still ongoing. As of 3 weeks ago, the president just launched the data protection system for registration. We at MNO, we are ready to take you through and conduct a data audit of your company, take you through the whole data protection process from collection processing, retention, and deleting of data. We are also here to take you through the process of compliance and just registration as a data controller or a processor. You might not understand the different regulations for a controller and a processor. In some situations, you can also find yourself registering as both a controller and a processor, depending on the activity you do. And that's what we're here to do for you, to take you through the whole process, to draft for you the needed documents and policies, and also register you as a data controller or a processor with the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner.
And then I understand you also do trainings?
Yes, we actually do company trainings. You can come to your offices and give you an overview of the Data Protection Act and what you need as a company to be compliant. Yes.
Fantastic. That was a great conversation, and I hope our audience is going to find a lot of value from that. In our next conversation, we're going to continue having this conversation on data protection, and in the next conversation, I think we're going to get to the interesting bit.
Yes.
Where we tell guys how to figure out deletion of data,
breach of data,
the breach of data. Yes.
And how your data is being processed. Are they processing it in accordance with the purpose they told you?
Okay.
Yes. Stay tuned.
So thanks guys for joining us. I hope there was a lot of value that you got from that. We'll see you in the next episode.